A very warm welcome. You're watching the Super Saturday Debate. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Hamas has agreed to release all the remaining Israeli hostages in an announcement milked by Donald Trump. He's called it unprecedented. That 2 days ahead of the October 7th anniversary of the deadly Hamas attacks on Israel. Using this as leverage, Hamas has now wanted further negotiations on key points of the US peace plan. This includes a free Palestine administered only by Palestinians, with no international supervision, with Hamas having no role in Gaza's governance apart from negotiations. So far, Hamas has remained mum on Donald Trump's key demand for disarming of the militant group. This as further negotiations will now be taking place in Egypt and not Doha anymore, as US envoy for Middle East Steve Witkoff, along with Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner, will now be headed to Egypt for the negotiations. But more importantly, just hours after Donald Trump called on Israel to stop bombing Gaza, Israel struck yet again. In fact, the Palestinian Health Ministry has stated that 66 people have been killed in just the last 24 hours, over 20 in just the last 12 hours, raising the big question: are Israel and Palestine in for yet another long-run negotiation? Because the war in Gaza has now changed the global debate on the two-state solution. This as Western support is pouring in for Palestine with a demand to end the war in Gaza, with key nations like France, Britain, Canada and Australia lending their support to Palestinian statehood, including Latin America and Africa as well. A cause already endorsed by India way back in 1988. In fact, India's Prime Minister Modi has reiterated his support yet again, this for peace to prevail in Gaza. But even as the international support is growing for a two-state solution, does Donald Trump have the political will to mount enough pressure on Israel to dissuade Netanyahu and his administration from the current course of action, which is war in Gaza? Raising the question: is the big push for Palestinian statehood a turning point or political theatre?
We were given a tremendous amount of help. Everybody was unified in wanting this war to end and seeing peace in the Middle East. And we're very close to achieving that. Thank you all, and everybody will be treated fairly.
This is the kind of conditions need to negotiate about some details about this, because it's impossible to release all of the war prisoner, the bodies or the corpse and the lives war prisoners.
Deep dive into this bulletin with some breaking inputs coming in as we are getting in the latest post coming in from the US President Donald Trump. His reaction stating, and I quote, "I appreciate that Israel has temporarily stopped the bombing in order to give the hostage release and peace deal a chance to be completed. Hamas must move quickly or else all bets will be off. I will not tolerate the delay which many think will happen or any outcome where Gaza poses a threat again. Let's get this done fast. Everyone will be treated fairly." All right, that's the latest post coming in from the US President. With that, let's quickly dive straight into our discussion. And for that, let me introduce my guests today. I'm joined in by Matthew Vadum, who's an American journalist, joining us live from Washington. Professor Gilad Hirschberger, who's an expert on Middle East conflict, joining us live from Herzliya in Israel. Ali M. Abushbak, who's a Palestinian independent researcher, joining us live from Cairo in Egypt. And Professor Brahmachalani, who's a strategic affairs expert. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in. Matthew, what is your assessment to begin with in terms of the US role at the moment? We are all very much aware of the kind of optimism that's been shared by the US President. But given the striking similarities as far as the foolhardiness is concerned between Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Netanyahu, is US in for yet another long-drawn negotiation over here?
I don't think this ends the process. I think that Hamas is still concerned about certain aspects of the deal, and they want to know that. My understanding is they want to know that if they hand over all the hostages, if the rest of the deal will actually be adhered to. And I'm not saying I share their concern, but that's what their concern is. And I'm actually still quite shocked that they agreed to the peace plan, because Hamas exists to obliterate Israel. And if it adheres to this peace plan, that means it will have to stop in its effort at eliminating Israel. So I'm still surprised that they agreed to this. And I would not be surprised if there are obstacles that arise as they try to implement this deal. But certainly, I hope that I'm wrong, and I hope that there is a peace plan that I hope that it is durable, and that it can come into play. Some on the Israeli side said it actually undermines Israeli security. And they may have a point, but I don't think I need to go. Right. I don't think I need to go into detail about that.
I want to quickly bring in Ali Abu Shbak as well. Ali, what's your assessment, given that, as Matthew's rightly highlighted, the inception of Hamas was based on the concrete sort of expectation that there should be an Islamic state, there should be Palestinian statehood. So what will this mean for Israel? Skeptics have also questioned the strategic silence maintained by Hamas, especially when it comes to Donald Trump's demand of disarmament of Hamas. Where is this going to steer the negotiations now?
First, thank you for having me. The thing is, Hamas is not going to establish a Islamic statehood in Palestine, as we are a circular country, Palestine. This is one point. Second point, I'm not optimist. Hamas' response was positive about it, but still the statement of Hamas, it's not clear. Hamas accepted the plan of Donald Trump, 20 points of peace, but still Hamas is not accepting to lie down its weapon. It's considered as a honor for them, and it's a significant issue. While Benjamin Netanyahu, he considered it as a big hurdles for them to reach for a peace. This is one point. Second point, Hamas welcomed the plan as a releasing the whole hostages and releasing in front of them some Palestinian prisoner from Israel is present. So the thing is, up to now, it's not clear Hamas response, and also about the technocrat regime who's going to select them, and they are going to supervise by Donald Trump and Tony Blair. So the thing is, it's not clear up to now, but I'm not optimist from the Israeli side after Hamas is going to release the hostages like what we have witnessed this year in the mid of January. It was a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, and suddenly resumed in the mid of March 2025. Despite that, Hamas was, obligated to release the hostages according to the negotiation. It was that time, and suddenly Israel resumed the war without any warning and without anything. But here also, I guess it's matter the life, not only for hostages, for captive. That's it. Hamas obligated to accept this deal without any mentioning for Palestinian statehood. As a Palestinian, they are fighting for self-determination. And up to now, in this plan, it's not clear who's going to rule. And unfortunately, Hamas accepting that without any rule for Palestinian Authority, which recognized by all the world as an authentic representative for the Palestinians. So this is a big issue that the international community start dealing with Hamas, which consider as a Palestinian function, and according to several countries consider as a terrorist group. They are negotiating with them and giving the Palestinian Authority their back, and without any kind of any kind of action for the Palestinian Authority or PLO,
Okay.
Palestinian Liberalization
Professor Gilad,
Organization.
I want to quickly bring you in on the key sticking points over here for both sides, whether it is Hamas. Can Hamas be trusted? Many have raised the fact that it was Donald Trump's ultimatum till Sunday that perhaps has now compelled them to come up with a response to the peace plan. Can Hamas be trusted just yet? Are they buying time? Secondly, in the last 12 hours alone, Israel struck Gaza again with over 20 people having died. Can Israel be trusted with a ceasefire?
Okay, I think that to understand the reactions of the different parties to this deal, we need to understand what all sides have to gain and what they have to lose. And I think that it's very important to understand that the Palestinian people are going to gain from this deal. It means that Israel will withdraw, the war will end, there is a plan for rehabilitating Gaza, there's an economic plan in this deal, so the Palestinians will gain. The Israeli people will gain. The war will end, the hostages will be released, Israelis will not have to send their children to war in Gaza. But the leadership of both sides have something to lose. The plan, as it is written right now, means that Hamas loses all of its political power and all of its military power. And that is why Hamas did not say yes. They said yes, but. And the nuances here are very important. So even though it seems like Hamas has responded affirmatively, it hasn't really done so, and we'll have to see in the coming days what exactly they mean.
It's
in the Israeli political system, it's also very complex. On the one hand, Netanyahu endorsed this plan, but one of the reasons Netanyahu hasn't accepted a deal for hostage release up until now is because of the right-wing elements in his government that threaten to topple his coalition. These right-wing elements are still going to threaten to topple his coalition. However, we are 1 year away from elections in Israel. And it may be the case that Netanyahu has changed his strategy. Maybe right now he's not so afraid of his coalition falling at this point if he is able to secure a deal that will increase his chances of winning the next election.
Professor Brahmachalani, how do you respond to Israel's reaction right now? Can Israel be trusted? Because remember, we are not looking at just gains and losses on the battleground. We are also looking at political gains over here because Netanyahu's administration, as has already been highlighted by Professor Gilad over here, are calling for an annexation of the West Bank. Much rests on that annexation. And Netanyahu himself had highlighted on the day the peace plan was announced by Trump in the White House that he does not stand for Palestinian statehood. So what does this mean when they're saying that the negotiations are now going to be taking place? What are going to be the sticking points or the bone of contention?
I think Israel should be very concerned about the seismic shift in American attitudes towards Israel. We had the New York Times CNN poll just a few days ago showing that most American voters oppose sending more American economic and military aid to Israel. And now, in today's Washington Post, there is another poll which delivers an even harsher verdict. Most American Jews now say that Israel is committing war crimes. The US has been the main backer of Israel over the decades. And this shift in American attitudes towards Israel should cause the Israeli leadership to rethink its strategy, because what's happening in Gaza is just not a fight against terrorism. Israel has gone beyond counterterrorism by devastating Gaza, by creating a very severe humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And this really strikes most people in the world as excessive. And I think the shift in American attitude towards Israel reflects this international concern and anger that while many people are sympathetic with Israel's fight against terrorism, most do not support the actual actions on the ground, which is that killing civilians, bombing homes and residential buildings, destroying much of Gaza, This is not a fight against terrorism. This is not the way you win a war against terrorism.
All right.
Israel is only creating long-term security problems for itself, because out of the ruins of Gaza will emerge new threats against Israel.
No, that's a very critical point. Professor Gilad, I want to quickly bring you in on that point, because our latest go-to point right now is going to be the recently concluded UNGA. Look at the kind of support that has poured in from not just the wider West, whether it's Britain or, say, Canada or, say, countries like France, who are supporting the cause for Palestinian statehood. You have Latin America, you have Africa joining the cause as well. As a proud Indian, I can say we did that way back in 1988. But is that also meaning wider global isolation for Israel?
Yes, I completely agree. Israel is facing today a diplomatic catastrophe, nothing less than that. We are more isolated than we've ever been before. Even our former allies and friends, and that includes the U.S. public, are turning their back to Israel, and that's a very, very dire price to pay for a war that at this point is achieving very little. It's important to say that most of the world stood behind Israel after October 7th. There was a lot of sympathy for Israel, and at the beginning of the war, there was still support for Israeli actions. But it's been at least a year now that most of the world does not support Israel's actions, and it's not clear whether our actions in Gaza have really achieved anything, even militarily, that justifies the very dire price that Israel is paying diplomatically.
Matthew, there's a lot resting on the annexation of West Bank. There's been no open opposition to that annexation coming in from the US Trump administration. In fact, Marco Rubio has also in the past hinted that US will not interfere over here. But what is it that could deter President Trump from supporting the annexation of the West Bank, given that it was the Abraham Accords, which has now become that jewel of sorts for as a foreign policy achievement for Donald Trump's previous presidency? Will he be compromising with that if he allows the annexation of West Bank? Because remember, that's become a bone of contention for these Arab nations. UAE already indicating that if there is an annexation, it will be crossing the red line. So will that not dent Donald Trump's own foreign policy achievements like the Abraham Accords?
I'm not certain what Donald Trump is thinking or what he plans to do. I think that he is at the point where he thinks that Israel has taken things as far as they can go, and he just wants this to end. Donald Trump is not a warmonger. He hasn't started any wars in his first presidency or his second presidency.
True, but he also has to preserve his achievements of his foreign policy, and Abraham Accords is the only, so far, the biggest achievement he's made.
Right, and as I was going to say that I don't think he wants anything. I get the feeling he doesn't want things to go any further than they have. So I imagine he would, and I'm just guessing, that he would not want the West Bank to be annexed, because he thinks that that would be too inflammatory and too likely to make hostilities drag on further.
Okay.
So he just wants peace. Look at what he's doing. He doesn't favor the extent. He doesn't favor the continuation of wars. He just wants peace, and I think that that's his overriding concern.
Running short of
whether
time.
It's good for the U.S. or Israel or not.
Ali, has the developments of the last 2 years, especially in this war of Gaza, the sheer magnitude of the kind of devastation we've seen, has that also now shifted sympathy? And is the Palestinian Authority now in a greater position of power than perhaps Israel was on October 7, 2023?
Unfortunately, about the position of Palestinian Authority, there is no rule for Palestinian Authority, and for this is while Israel on the ground also weakens the Palestinian Authority without any kind of without empower them. Instead of that, empowering Hamas, negotiating with Hamas and giving the Hamas an authority to decide about Palestinian in Gaza, that giving Hamas the right to do whatever.
Okay.
This is in my opinion. Hamas is a part of Palestinian function, but only take a deal with only Hamas. That's you are giving them the permission.
All right. I'm
to
only
be
left with a
ruling
minute.
Gaza.
Okay. I want to
be
just quickly
ruling.
give. Okay. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah, to rule Gaza, but also on the ground, the Palestinian narrative, it's become more strong, while the international community now adopting the Palestinian narrative, despite all of the Israelis' propaganda, or the only civilians, journalists, and the footage that released and flooded social media make the international community.
Professor Chilani, India has been very vocal about terrorism, and so should India now also get more vocal about the role that Hamas is going to be playing in negotiations, given that India is uniquely positioned. We are the ones who had acknowledged Palestinian statehood way back in 1988, something that US has still not done.
India is one of the very few democracies in the non-Western world that still supports Israel, and for good reason, because the Indian public has, for a long time, been quite sympathetic to Israel's cause. But today, as a friend of Israel, India needs to advise the Israeli Prime Minister Bibi that he needs to find a way to end this war in Gaza, because it's not good for Israel's long-term security, nor is it good for India's own interest that its friend Israel is embroiled in a prolonged war in Gaza. But I think on the larger issue about Trump's so-called peace plan for Gaza, we should not forget this is his second plan. The first plan talked about taking over, the U.S. taking over and redeveloping Gaza. And we should also not forget that, at the UN, he recently claimed that he ended 7 unendable wars.
Okay.
And in fact, 2 of the 7 wars never existed, so he couldn't have ended them. Some others remain unresolved. And in one case, the Israel-Iran war, Trump actually joined the fight by ordering U.S. bombing of Iranian nuclear sites.
All right.
So given his record, one has to really question whether he is really seeking peace in Gaza or he is seeking to burnish his record for a Nobel Peace Prize.
For a Nobel Peace Prize. Here's hoping that this does prove to be the much-needed turning point in this war and is not just mere political theatre. Many thanks to you, gentlemen, for joining in on this insightful discussion. And that's all I have for you in this newscast. Thank you so much for watching.